What if I told you there was a Pablo Escobar of cannabis? What if I told you there was a man from Boston that built a multi-billion-dollar cannabis smuggling operation out of Jamaica in the 1970s? What if I told you that the Jamaican government suppresses information about this individual and his organization online because back in the 1970s, the entire Jamaican economy was reliant on them? Welcome to the Trap Tree series, episode 2. Whenever it comes to controlled substances such as cannabis or narcotics, we always expect to see big names on the list. With Pablo Escobar and his cartels causing all of the mayhem in the 80s and 90s, people don't really have an idea about what went down before the South Americans took over the drug routes. The history before the cartels and the coke is all but a blur, with a lot of effort being taken down to remove certain names from history. The names which we speak of in this video are quite unknown to most, and their significance in history is dwindling down as time passes by. When it comes to cannabis and its entry into the United States, most will picture it plagued with violence and blood, similar to the narcotic adventures of the Mexicans and Colombians. However, when it's in comparison, cannabis and its smuggling proceedings went down much smoother and was peaceful in nature. We class various drug operations and smugglers purely on the amount of wealth they were able to hoard. However, it could be said that the true wealth of an organization is not just about the money they've had, but also about the influence they pose on a country. The narco groups of the Mexican lands have enough power and influence with wealth to shut down major parts of Mexico. Pablo Escobar had enough wealth and power to bring two countries to a halt by drilling a hole throughout their economy. So which name in Jamaican history had such an impact on its country's GDP, making heads turn upon the mentioning of his name? The name you probably do not know, but definitely should, is the individual known as Brother Louv. If you were wondering if that name is real or if it's just a street name, the answer is no for both. The image of the Brother Louv does not fit the typical image of a drug smuggler. Considering this story originates from the heart of Jamaica, you might picture a young, dark-skinned ghetto man, hell-bent on getting rich and successful. However, Brother Louv was in a way the complete opposite of what someone would imagine when they think of a man with such high influence in the world of drug smuggling and cannabis. Brother Louv is not a black man from the streets of Jamaica. In fact, he was not originally from Jamaica at all. Brother Louv's real name was Thomas F Reilly Jr., and he was from the United States of America. The records of this man claims that he first set foot on Jamaica in the 1970s, making his way all the way from Boston. Physically, he looked nothing like what you would expect from a traditional cannabis man. He was white and was freakishly tall, with a height that was as 6'7". That was written down in the books. Prior to his arrival in Jamaica, he was notably an altar boy at a Christian church. This white man, who was born and raised in the town of Boston, with no connections to the world of cannabis, was about to be the leader of the biggest cannabis smuggling operation in Jamaican history, and possibly in the world's history. It is also as if the two countries are trying their level best to erase this man from the history books. His Wikipedia page has already been taken down for unknown reasons, and everything about him is getting shrouded with mystery, almost like a forgotten tale. Upon first setting foot in Kingston on the Jamaican islands, Thomas Reilly met some ganja men. These ganja men helped him to create connections all around town. Using them and the help of a few elders, Thomas Reilly made his way to the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, where he was taken into their establishment. After being made a member, he did not stop there. Christened with the name Brother Louv, he rose among the ranks and made it all the way to the top of the church's hierarchy. His entry into the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church marks an important point in its history, as it was very rarely that a white man was given a chance to enter its grounds. There was a name that played a big role in the birth of Brother Louv. This person is the sole reason why the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church would later rise up to be known as the Godfathers of Ganja. The most important name on this list is George Baker Ivy. He was the reason Thomas Reilly was able to enter the church in the first place. It was his idea that the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church should open its doors to men of other races. Before this, the church was a movement for black nationalist people. It was a pro-black organization which held iconic figures such as Marcus Garvey in high regard. The church preached about black unity and the power of the black people. Brother Louv was different from other brethren in his organization. Unlike the other leaders in the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church, he had a vision. As expected, his vision circulated around the value of cannabis. He explained to the other members of this church of the value of this asset. Prior to this, cannabis was used in ceremonial purposes within its culture and as a herb to enhance spiritual awareness. But upon hearing Brother Louv's vision for cannabis, the Zion Coptic Church decided to take things more seriously and started working on influencing the world internationally. Brother Louv and the Coptic Church started to preach by moving all around the country, making a name for themselves in places such as St. Elizabeth, Manchester, and Kingston. Brother Louv and the Coptics decided to make their first stand in a place known as the Coptic Heights in St. Thomas. It was also in St. Thomas that the first black movement which kickstarted everything came to be. After settling down in St. Thomas, Brother Louv and the Coptics began to create an incredible self-sustaining complex. The lands around St. Thomas were fertile and rich with resources. The farmlands they built using the money and resources the Brotherhood could collect were absolutely massive. The farms grew everything from fruits, vegetables, and even raised dairy. It is said that whatever fruit, vegetable you could think of, the Coptics were planting it on their farmlands. The self-sustaining infrastructure they built was impressive beyond words. They even started their own lumber mill. When they cut trees and processed them to make various items, there was even a record of a coal mine which the Coptics were operating on the grounds nearby. Brother Louv and the church managed to transform the land from a desolate area of vegetation to a fully functioning and self-sustaining industrial complex. But it was not the fruits, vegetables, or the cattle that made the Coptics so wealthy and powerful. After creating their small safe haven in St. Thomas, the Coptics, led by Thomas Reilly, started to move cannabis into the States. They did not move their cannabis in small quantities. It is said that no one in history has moved so much cannabis in such a small time. Billions. The US government at the time said Coptics made billions of dollars in profit by smuggling cannabis into the States. But now, increase that value through inflation, and you could see how rich the Coptics really were. If you want a clear picture of the wealth that the Coptics were amassing, picture the Jamaican economy in the 1970s. The whole country was hanging on for dear life as their land was on the brink of an economic crisis. It was stated by several well-established politicians that the only thing keeping the country going was the influx of money through cannabis smuggling. Edward Seager and Michael Manley were two such names who spoke openly about the positive effect of cannabis on the economy. Growing and smuggling cannabis was the only thing in the country that was bringing in wealth, and it created jobs for thousands and thousands of people across the country. It is not controversial to state that it was cannabis that managed to pull Jamaica out of their economic crisis. Thanks to the green gold of the lands, the people were able to overcome a large-scale disaster. Those living now might not remember how influential and powerful the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church was, but Jamaican elders still speak of these men with such high regard. The reason was simple. Unlike other smuggling groups in the world, the Coptics did not cause violence. They did not compete with other groups and did not create problems for the locals. Instead, they took care of the entire country using the money they were amassing. At one point, entire cities were founded by the church. Children went to school and studied because of the inflow of cash through the Coptics. Some of the books that were printed back then even had a picture of a cannabis leaf on it. This is how influential and powerful the Coptics were. At one point in time, when asked, the Coptics revealed that they had over 10,000 acres of land in Jamaica. All this land was used for the cultivation of cannabis and to sustain their own organization. Remember, this is only what the Coptics disclosed it to the public, right? It is hinted that they had even more resources and land all around the country. Even so, 10,000 acres for cannabis production is mind-blowing. None of the names you see in movies or the names that were popularized as major drug operations were on scale in comparison to the Coptics. They pushed cannabis so well that the smugglers and growers that came after them studied how they managed to create so much wealth and power in order to use those tactics for themselves. They truly were the pioneers of their business in Jamaica. Thomas Reilly, or Brother Louv, was not just a leader for the smuggling operation carried out by the Zion Coptic Church, he was a preacher. What did he preach about? Thomas Reilly went about proclaiming how the white men and women of America have destroyed lands such as Jamaica. He was almost pushing cannabis as a form of funding in order to repair what was broken by them. This was a very controversial move by Brother Louv as he promoted the Black Power movement, stating Marcus Garvey to be his idol. Of course, not everyone believed his motives and movement, as it was very surprising that a white man at the time would be speaking against his own kind and support black minorities. Many were beginning to wonder if this was just being done for his own personal gains. After all, he was living in a country where black men were the majority. Therefore, by siding with them, he can have an easier time managing his cannabis business and hold his influence over the people. The question of whether Thomas Reilly was genuine or not was the biggest turning point for many of his prospective followers, because the idea of a white man supporting black movements was almost unbelievable, like I said at the time. But whether he was a genuine or not, his tactics worked. Jamaica was falling apart in the 70s and they needed funds to keep it running. Just as it now, money was a crucial factor for any movement, and the Coptic Church had a lot of it. There are only a few records of how much help Brother Louv and the Coptic Church gave to their respective communities. The Jamaican government had been clearing the history behind this man from the books. Even his Wikipedia has been removed, like we mentioned earlier. But words once uttered cannot be taken back. This is why statements on record from famous politicians such as Edward Seaga are very important. The Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church built everything from churches, roads, to even community housing schemes. They even sent entire parishes to school, funding children by buying them clothes, books, and food. The amount of money that the Coptics had invested into the community has put them on the same level as Pablo Escobar and his impact on the Colombian community, but minus the bloodshed and violence. The Coptic Church managed to evade any form of violence through their professionalism. Brother Louv handled their cannabis smuggling similar to a legitimate business. It was never about territorial power or making more money than another group to remain relevant. The Coptics handled everything professionally. This is what prevented the outbreak of violence in a trade as volatile as illegal cannabis smuggling. But if everything was going so great, what caused the downfall of the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church? The Coptics had a very unique movement that was similar to that of the Rastafarians. They held cannabis as their sacrament, believing that it was cannabis that was referred to in the Bible. A few examples of it are from the burning bush to daily bread. The Coptics believed that smoking the herb several times a day during their prayers was a way to get closer to God himself. They also promoted the idea that smoking cannabis allows every human being to see God residing amongst each other and every one of us, and how adhering to these teachings will make the world a better place for everyone. They were very open about their use of cannabis, and this was the first cause of their downfall. While the Coptics believed their religion would protect them and exempt themselves from the laws that were placed on controlled substances such as cannabis, their false sense of security paved a way for their demise. The Coptics were shipping in tons of illegal cannabis from Jamaica and Miami every week. Ships loaded up with their green gold. We can even say that it was not smuggling at one point. It was daylight trading. It was a legit business almost. It was run like one. The Coptics had amassed a massive amount of wealth that they were struggling to hide, or they did not bother to, as they had a firm belief that their religion would save them from the DEA. At their peak, the Coptics had a trucking firm, a container company, and their very own auto parts company. Not to mention the thousands of locals working in their gardens creating produce and dairy. The organization even printed a newspaper that they distributed for free, calling it the Coptic Times. But their massive wealth and influence gained the attention of US media and its government. The Coptics bought their own compound on Star Island, which is just right off of Miami Beach. Another indication of how wealthy their organization was. Everything changed when a 60 Minutes segment went on air in 1979 with Dan Rathers.
It was in early 1978 that the local Miami media began focusing in on activities of the Coptic Church.
At one time, we were invited by the Coptics to come to their house, to see them as they lived. And I think for them that may have backfired, because what we saw were the kids in the house also smoking these big spliffs of marijuana, and it was stunning. That was a turning point for public perception about the Zion Coptics.
They would see children around the herb, and which wasn't right, and scorned us for that.
A civil action for public nuisance was brought against the Coptics rather than a criminal charge for possession of marijuana. The state attorney's office had in fact offered to drop all charges if the Coptics would move out of Star Island to some place where they were less conspicuous. The Coptics flatly refused. Instead, they hired the best and most expensive lawyers in town.
The Miami Beach Zoning Department is investigating the Coptics, so is the Miami Beach Police Department. So is the Dade County State Attorney, the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, the Florida Department of Criminal Law Enforcement, the Coast Guard, Customs, DEA, the IRS, and perhaps the FBI. It is quite likely there are now more agencies investigating the Coptics than are investigating reputed underworld financier Meyer Lansky, who was previously Miami Beach's most notorious resident.
The United States government, they didn't know what to do. They already said we were a church within the meaning of the First Amendment. The ganja was essential to our church. So I really don't think that they knew what to do. So I think they just stalled. And finally, I think it was politics motivated and said, you know, these people can't continue to flaunt the law.
They got too public, they got too brazen, they lost control of what they were doing. And I think that's where it went to pot. They said, we got to stop this, let's come down on. That's when the feds came in and started arresting people.
In November of 1977, assisted by local authorities, agents of our Tampa office executed a search warrant on a farm in Dunellen in Marion County. They arrested 6 individuals there, and they discovered approximately 25,000 pounds of marijuana secreted in underground storage bins underneath the barn.
There were rooms on the ground, that's what it amounted to. Later on in the investigation, I discovered that they had rented a front-end loader for the purpose of digging the underground storerooms and then building a barn on top of it.
They came and they took us away and they took our things, took our ganja.
3 months later, the Coast Guard boarded this 60-foot yacht at the entrance of the Cross Florida Barge Canal in Citrus County. On board, they found 20 tons of marijuana. 16 people were arrested nearby, including Keith Gordon, the head of the Coptic Church in Jamaica.
We came down on them early this particular morning, and they scattered all over the place. And we ended up with a yacht, several buses, and 19 tons of marijuana.
Well, today, a grand jury indicted 19 members of the sect, charging them with operating a nationwide marijuana smuggling operation. The indictment alleged they used 8 ocean-going vessels, operated through at least 5 corporations, and had made a fortune in the smuggling operation.
I know I'm not a criminal. Look what these men are doing. Look what they're doing, man. The Supreme Court said we're a church and I'm a priest. Look what these are doing to a priest.
Dan Rathers in 60 Minutes did a thorough interview on the Coptics affair, which snowballed into a public outrage. Pictures of small white children smoking cannabis and the massive land plots belonging to the Coptics spurred the U.S. public to their feet, or at least enough of them. In 1979, the Coptic Church and its associates were brought before the law. The group, which was led by Brother Louv, was accused and tried for smuggling massive amounts of illegal cannabis from Jamaica to the shores of Miami. They were later convicted of this crime, and each member was given a prison sentence. Brother Louv got his 12-year sentence after being charged guilty of the crime. However, being the leader, Brother Louv did not get the longest sentence. James Tranmer, a member of the Coptics, got the harshest sentence of 35 years in prison. This is because Tranmer refused to acknowledge his crime and did not plead guilty. Instead, he stood his ground and highlighted his beliefs to the jury. According to the records, Tranner told the jury, "I'm an herb man. I've always been an herb man for more than 30 years. The herb is a sacrament. Ganja is my sacrament. America is a sick nation spiritually. You cannot win this fight against marijuana. If you fight against the herb, you fight against creation." In order to hurt the judge even further, Tremor added, quote, "I will take anything you give me for ganja. You can't take ganja away from the people. Ganja is what is given by God for the people, and you can't take that away from them." End quote. Today, there is very little you can dig up about the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church. There is even less about Brother Louv. We can easily state that Brother Louv was one of the first cannabis activists to ever push the idea of legalizing cannabis across the states. If you truly want to know the full glory of these lost people, then you really need to speak to the elders from that generation, as they are the only beings in existence to know the truth about the Coptics and their impact on the country. While there are some documentaries that have been made, really though, there's not a ton. Anyways, this has been the Trap Tree series. Very much appreciate you guys for watching. Please make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Please guys, let us know down below who would you want to see next in this series. Tell your friends. And shout out to the Ethiopian Zion Coptic Church. Pretty amazing story. They truly were on par with Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel, minus all of the bloodshed and violence.